Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, June 16th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the gubernatorial election in 2021 that nobody seems to be talking about. You've seen my countless videos about Virginia and the upcoming 2022 midterm elections, but one thing you might have noticed hasn't really come across my channel is the New Jersey governor election, and there's a number of reasons for that. New Jersey is a very interesting state that actually recently had a Republican governor back in 2017. It elected Phil Murphy, however, to succeed that Republican governor, and it was Chris Christie, which I think you all might find to be quite hilarious, to say the least. I think that Chris Christie is a very fascinating character, especially in American politics. Very high in terms of popularity back in 2013, Hurricane Sandy time period, and then immediately fell to abysmal approval ratings. You're talking 15-20% amongst the New Jersey constituents. So for a man that was so loved and hated in a very brief period of time, that led his lieutenant governor to run back in 2017 against the current governor, but at the time was not the current governor, Phil Murphy. Now, he's seeking re-election, and there doesn't seem to be a competitive nature to this race like what we're seeing in the state of Virginia. While the New Jersey had a Republican governor earlier, I guess more recently than the state of Virginia, we aren't looking at New Jersey at all in a very similar fashion whatsoever. Once we found out these primary results, it pretty much confirmed exactly what we expected it to be. Jack Ciattarelli ended up winning the Republican primary, completely outspent the rest of the candidates, and looking at Phil Murphy, well, he didn't really have an opponent, so there was nothing really to talk about in the Democratic primary there. But on the Republican side, it pretty much ended up being exactly how we expected it. Ciattarelli won, and that was exactly how the results were on my live stream. So we sort of knew at that moment that we had our pairing up between the Democrats and the Republicans in the state of New Jersey. And it also does not get much interest, largely because the state of the race right now is the fact that New Jersey is safe for the Democratic Party. Based off the predictions, you see it solid, and likely Democrat. If you look at the endorsements and you look on the endorsements on the Republican side, you're not really seeing a huge emphasis. If President Trump isn't endorsing the Republican nominee, it typically means that he knows that Republican isn't going to win. President Trump loves his track record, and he doesn't endorse failing or losing candidates. Jack Ciattarelli might be one of those. Now, eventually, a little bit later, we might see an endorsement from the Republican side, President Trump, Mike Pence, other top names, but it probably won't change the outcome of this race. So far, the preliminary election data is telling us that the closest margin we've seen is a Phil Murphy 11-point victory over Jack Ciattarelli. And then if you're looking at the Rutgers poll, you'll see that the defeat is much larger. 52-24, 52-26, depending on whether or not you're looking at adults or registered voters. Quite fascinating to see that Phil Murphy has such an astounding lead this point in the race. The fact Jack Ciattarelli can't even get above the mid to high 20s really tells you a lot more about this race than what you already know. It tells you that he's not even getting the standard percentage of the Republican vote. In the state of New Jersey in the 2020 election, Donald Trump received 41% of the vote. If that Republican nominee isn't even getting 41%, that means they're not a recognizable name, and it means they don't really have a shot at this governor election. And New Jersey has also taken a pretty significant turn from where it was back in 2013 and 2009. Now, in 2009, the governor's election went to Chris Christie largely as a referendum against President Obama. Chris Christie won here narrowly against the incumbent Democrat, and it took a lot of energy on the Republican side in order for this to happen. Then in 2013, Hurricane Sandy hit, not in 2013, 2012, and then the 2013 governor election occurred, and Chris Christie, soaring in terms of his approval rating, won overwhelmingly in this state, won with 60% of the vote to his opponent's 38%. It's an almost exact opposite of our presidential election results. In fact, if you look here, just 2 counties voted for the Democratic Party. The rest of the state, all red. Camden County, red. Mercer County, red. All of these counties, solid for Chris Christie because he was popular. Then Bridgegate occurred. Then a number of things, the closing of the beaches, and then going on to the beaches, a number of things in his ties to the Trump presidency and the 2016 Republican nomination process. Chris Christie pretty much put a target on his head and made himself so unpopular within the state that nobody tied to him could do well electorally. And that's what happened in 2017. His Republican lieutenant governor ended up losing by a pretty large amount. I mean, this was a pickup for Democrats, a pickup that they won by 13.5 percentage points. 14 points if you want to round upwards. You know, you're talking about a 14-point victory for the Democratic Party in a flipped Governor's election. How interesting. How fascinating to see such a dramatic change in events. From when the Democrats won in 2013 just 2 counties, Phil Murphy won more counties than he lost. That was certainly not the case for the Democrat back in 2013. And looking at the trajectory of New Jersey over the past couple of elections, it hasn't really fluctuated much. I mean, New Jersey hasn't really changed from its solid Democratic rating, except for once in 2004 when it went to John Kerry by just 6.7%. But keep in mind, my home state of Maryland went to Kerry by just 13 points. California went to Kerry by just 9 points, 9.9%, 10 points. Delaware went to Kerry by just 7.6. So this election was quite interesting to see how close some of these states actually got. It's actually quite baffling that Arkansas and New Jersey were around the same characterization. That Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Missouri weren't safe Republican states. Wow, times certainly have changed. But New Jersey hasn't really changed that much. It's always been solid for the Democrats, which is why we don't need to talk much about the New Jersey governor election. I was originally going to make this video talking about the only sources of polling data in the state of New Jersey and why this state is honestly going to be pretty solid for the Democratic Party, but I thought that we could actually discuss why it really isn't media worthy or noteworthy. It was back in 2017 for the sole reason that it was a Democratic pickup. Had it not been a Democratic pickup, we would not have covered it, and it would not have been covered on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News as an election night race. Yes, it's a governor election, but it really had no national implications unless it was a pickup, which it was. There is no national implications about New Jersey currently. Phil Murphy is popular, and he's winning by overwhelming large margins in the preliminary election data. He's starting out with plus 50%, which means that 50% plus, which means he only has, room to fall, but he probably won't. Considering that he won more than what the poll suggested back in 2017, I'm confident he will win more than just 52% of the vote. And I am confident that the Republican will win more than what they are expected to win currently, but it isn't too bad, I would say, for the Democrats to be up 20 points this early in the game, 30 points, 28 points in the most recent poll, which I found to be, something to point out. Now, like I had said, New Jersey hasn't really been this state that the Republican Party has had much luck in the past besides Chris Christie. But in 2018, we saw a very big shift in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey had 2 races that were deemed competitive on the Democratic side, or 2 races that were held by Republicans that were competitive. Democrats won both. 2 races held by Democrats, or where Democrats were favored, Democrats won both. And if you're looking at the state itself, it went from a very significant change of being 7 Democrats and 5 Republicans to 11 Democrats and 1 Republican. Think about that for a moment. 1 out of the 12 representatives in New Jersey were Republicans. If you do that math, 1 divided by 12, what do you get? 8.3%. The popular vote shows that the Democratic Party only won 59.92%. Republicans won 39%. 8 versus 39. And this isn't necessarily a question of strict gerrymandering. I mean, Democrats didn't exactly have a super large advantage in the state. They were tied as recently as 2014. If you look at 2012, 2010, before the new map was drawn, Democrats went down 7-6. 2012 rolls around, it's 6-6. 2014, tied again. 2016, Democrats gained 1. And that actually is a better representation of the House of Representatives vote. But in 2018, complete change where the Democrats are now at 11-1. Now, in 2020, they lost a race with Jeff Van Drew winning in his district as the Republican. It was pretty competitive, though, if you look at the congressional race. When you're looking at the final results, Jeff Van Drew almost lost to Amy Kennedy. It was still within not narrow, super narrow down to like the wire, but you were talking about Amy Kennedy coming within a pretty good shot at winning and certainly could run for this race in the future. And if the year ends up being more favorable, Jeff Van Drew certainly could be out of the United States House of Representatives. But the Democrats are at 10-2. Even 10 divided by 12. I mean, you're talking about a 16.67% representation for the Republicans, yet they garner 42% of the vote in the state of New Jersey. So while it is a question of unfair representation, and I do think that is exactly what it is, it also shows just how much the Democrats have improved relative to 2016, the last year before 2017, before a Democrat took over in the governor's mansion in the state of New Jersey. And I don't really expect this re-election bid to be entirely different. The House election results show a significant improvement for Democrats from 7-5 up to 11-1 down to 10-2. Nothing really super bad for Democrats in that governor in those House elections. Very good results. On the presidential race, Joe Biden just returned the state of New Jersey down to the safe Democratic column. He won here by, 15, 16 points. I mean, you're talking about a 16.8% margin of victory in the state of New Jersey. So a pretty significant gain for the Democratic Party. Something is, 15.8% probably, somewhere around there. My math isn't 100% exact. Sorry about that. But I'm telling you that New Jersey is a safe Democratic state. And Joe Biden was able to actually shift the state towards the left. I mean, almost all of the counties had a leftward shift in the state of New Jersey, ultimately driving it from what was in the likely column into the safe column. So even when it was a likely state as well, I do want to point this out, Hillary Clinton still won the state by 14 points. It wasn't a John Kerry type of margin. It wasn't a Clinton 92 type of margin. It was a pretty resounding margin, just a percentage point off from being in the safe column. And Joe Biden returned it there, a 15.9% victory. In fact, New Jersey is comparable to the likes of Missouri. New Jersey and Missouri are on the same level of non-competitiveness. So that means 2021, you really shouldn't expect anything different. While the fundraising does show that Jack Ciattarelli raised $6.8 million, that isn't going to do much. When you have a popular Democrat, when you have someone who has also raised $7.8 million, usually this election should be some type of opposition or referendum against the president of the United States. Joe Biden still remains popular. The majority of the country approves of Joe Biden's performance in the Oval Office. There isn't some large sentiment against Joe Biden. I might have said Donald Trump. I don't even know if I did or not. Against Joe Biden that won't be this determining factor in the 2021 races. So far, Joe Biden is holding out, and all he has to do is hold out for just a few more months. June, July, August, September, October, that's 5 months, and don't count this month, so 4 months, and then it's election day. So if Joe Biden can maintain this honeymoon period the same way that we've seen other presidents in the past do, maybe the Democratic Party will be able to have a pretty strong performance in the state of New Jersey, a pretty strong performance in the state of Virginia. But it really just doesn't need that national attention because it's an easily predictable race. I agree with the Cook Political Report and the Inside Elections ranking. Solid D makes sense. Could I see likely D? Absolutely. Do I see a Republican victory? Not at all. Do I see a lean Democrat victory? Not currently. Not at all for right now. I mean, Jack Ciattarelli isn't going to be winning this race, at least for the foreseeable future. We're not going to see some dramatic change, some dramatic shift in the balance of the polls and the current state of the race. Main takeaway, New Jersey is safe, and it needs to be treated as such. So this will probably be one of my few videos about the governor's race in the state of New Jersey. If there is some major development, I'll cover it. If Donald Trump ends up visiting the state, I will cover it as well. If we do start to see some national attention on the race, if Joe Biden starts to become unpopular, it does deserve some more attention than what he gets currently. But the reason why it really isn't being covered is because you can sort of tell, and you could have known probably after 2017 and 2018 who which party was going to win in 2021. You could have taken that away straight from the House election results or the 14-point victory in a pickup election against the incumbent lieutenant governor. I mean, Phil Murphy had a pretty strong result back in 2017, and that should not be taken lightly. The Democratic Party used 2017 as their first referendum against President Trump, and it ended up working. They won in New Jersey, they won in Virginia, they nearly flipped the state House of Delegates in the state of Virginia. In 2018, referendum against President Trump. The New Jersey Democrats went from 7 to 11. They were able to win in a number of statewide races. And then 2019 rolls around, and Virginia, which coincides with New Jersey in many of its elections, Virginia flips towards the Democrats in the Senate and in the House of Delegates. So those 4 years were referendums against President Trump, but New Jersey doesn't seem to be that referendum against President Biden. While it isn't a state that you would see as much Republican enthusiasm as maybe another Republican state, if Republicans don't make major advancements, if they don't improve off their 2020 margin or their, I wouldn't say margin of loss, but their defeat margin of 15.9%, if you see the Republican lose by more than that, that sort of tells you that maybe there isn't some sentiment or amount of energy on the Republican side that's able to combat President Biden and his administration. And I really don't think New Jersey is going to be at all in a position where you are going to be waiting for those results to pour in, going to be constantly refreshing the New York Times screen, going to Twitter, going to media sites. You're not going to do any of that for New Jersey in this election. And that's exactly why it isn't being covered. So like I said a few minutes ago, this will probably be one of my few videos about the state of New Jersey, but if something interesting happens, I will certainly keep you guys updated. But for right now, we sort of know who's going to win. The numbers show it. The fundraising numbers show it. We could have predicted this after 2017 and 2018 and 2020. There isn't much else to discuss about the state of New Jersey. And that sort of means the race is a little bit boring, but that's how many of these races are. It's safe for the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's the 2022 election night for my United States Senate elections. I recently made that one. Go ahead and check it out if you want to. If not, there's a playlist that you can watch as well. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.